The billionaire CEO predicted Marcus would quit within a week, her voice cold with certainty as she dismissed him like every janitor before. He looked her in the eye, thought of his daughter's empty refrigerator, and spoke the single word that would change both their lives forever. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The fluorescent lights of Sterling Dynamics hummed their eternal, monotonous song as Marcus Chun pushed his janitorial cart down the marble-floored hallway of the 42nd floor. It was 11:30 at night, and the building was a cathedral of silence, empty except for the ghosts of ambition that seemed to linger in every corner. He had been working this shift for exactly 7 days, and in those 7 days he had perfected the art of being invisible. His cart squeaked softly as he moved, the sound oddly comforting in the vast emptiness. The smell of industrial cleaner clung to his clothes, a sharp chemical scent that he knew would still be there when he got home to his daughter. Emma would wrinkle her nose and make that face she always made, the one that looked so much like her mother's that it physically hurt to see, but she would hug him anyway because she was 6 years old and still believed her father could do no wrong. Marcus had learned the layout of the building quickly. The executive offices were on the top 3 floors, all glass and chrome and breathtaking views of the city skyline. The 39th housed finance, and their trash cans were perpetually overflowing with coffee cups and energy drink cans, evidence of a department that never truly slept. He cleaned them all with the same methodical precision, never lingering, never making a sound. He had been warned about the CEO on his second day by an older janitor named Luis, a man with kind eyes and permanent worry lines etched into his forehead. Sterling Dynamics had burned through 4 night janitors in the past 6 months, Luis had explained while they shared a break in the basement locker room. All of them had walked off the job within 2 weeks. The problem was always the same: Victoria Sterling herself. Victoria Sterling was a legend in the corporate world. A self-made billionaire who had built her technology empire from a small startup in her garage to a global powerhouse in less than 15 years. She was brilliant, ruthless, and according to every business magazine that had ever profiled her, absolutely uncompromising. She was also notorious for working until 3 or 4 in the morning, and she had very specific ideas about how her building should be maintained. The previous janitors had all made the same mistake. They had tried to clean around her while she worked. They had attempted to be efficient, to do their jobs and get out. But Victoria Sterling did not tolerate interruptions, did not appreciate the sound of vacuum cleaners or the smell of cleaning products while she was in the middle of reviewing quarterly projections. She had a famous temper, and that temper had reduced grown men to stuttering apologies before they handed in their resignations the very next day. Marcus had developed a different strategy. He simply waited. He would clean every other floor, every other office, every other corner of the massive building, and he would save the executive suite for last. Then he would sit in the janitorial closet on the 41st floor, reading a worn paperback novel under the flickering light, waiting for the distinctive sound of her office door closing and her heels clicking toward the private elevator. Only when he was certain she was gone would he emerge and clean her domain in the blessed silence she had left behind. It had worked perfectly for a week. Tonight, he thought, would be no different. He had finished the 38th through 41st floors by 11:15. Now he simply had to wait. He parked his cart in its usual spot, grabbed his book, and settled into the small metal chair in the supply closet. The novel was a mystery, something about a detective and a missing heiress, but his mind kept wandering. He thought about Emma, asleep in their tiny apartment on the other side of the city, watched over by Mrs. Chun from next door, a grandmother whose own grandchildren had moved away and who seemed to have adopted his daughter as her own. Emma had asked him that morning why he had to work at night. Why couldn't he have a day job like other daddies? He had knelt down to her level, smoothing back her dark hair, and told her that night jobs paid more and that this way he could take her to school every morning and pick her up every afternoon. He did not tell her that he had sent out 237 resumes for positions in his actual field, mechanical engineering, and had received exactly 3 responses, all of them polite rejections. He did not tell her that his degree, once worth something, had been rendered nearly obsolete by a 3-year gap in his employment history, a gap created by the 2 years he had spent as his wife's primary caregiver while cancer slowly stole her away, and the year after that when he had been too broken to function at all. He did not tell her that he was 42 years old, overqualified for everything and qualified for nothing, and that this janitor position with its graveyard shift and its minimum wage was the only job offer he had received in 8 months of searching. So he sat in the closet with his book and he waited, and he told himself that this was enough, that providing for his daughter was enough, that being there for her was enough. At the humiliation of mopping floors in a building where he had once interviewed for a senior engineering position, back when he still had a future, was a small price to pay for keeping a roof over her head and food on the table. At 12:15 he heard it, the sound he had been waiting for. The heavy door of the CEO's office opened and heels clicked sharply against marble. He waited another 3 minutes, counting them off in his head, giving her time to reach the elevator, descend the 42 floors, and exit the building. Then he stood, stretched his aching back, and wheeled his cart toward the executive suite. The door to her office was slightly ajar, which was unusual but not alarming. Perhaps she had simply forgotten to pull it closed. He pushed it open fully, reaching for the light switch, and froze. Victoria Sterling was standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, silhouetted against the glittering cityscape. She had not left at all. She turned slowly, and even in the dim light he could see the sharp angles of her face, the severe cut of her dark suit, and the cold calculation in her eyes. He had been caught. His entire careful system, his strategy for survival, had just collapsed. His mouth went dry. He gripped the handle of his cart as if it were a life preserver. He should say something, apologize, explain, but the words tangled in his throat. She took 3 steps forward, her heels making that distinctive clicking sound on the hardwood floor of her office. When she spoke, her voice was low, measured, and absolutely devoid of warmth. "You are the new one," she said. It was not a question. Marcus managed a small nod. "Ma'am." Miss Sterling. He hated the way his voice sounded, small and uncertain. She continued to approach, closing the distance between them until she was standing directly in front of him. She was tall, nearly his height in her heels, and her gaze was unflinching, dissecting him like a specimen under glass. "I have noticed a pattern," she continued. "Every night for the past week, my office is not cleaned until well after 1 in the morning. The rest of the building is spotless by midnight, but mine is saved for last. Why is that?" He could lie. He could say he had been following a particular route, a specific system, but something about the directness of her gaze made deception feel impossible. "Because I was waiting for you to leave," he said quietly. "I did not want to disturb you while you worked." Her expression did not change, but he saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Surprise, perhaps. She had not expected honesty. "So you have been hiding," she said, waiting in the shadows like a mouse, hoping to avoid the cat. He felt a spark of anger then, small but real. It cut through the fear and the humiliation. He had been avoiding a confrontation, yes. He had been trying to keep this job, to avoid becoming the 5th janitor to be devoured by the notorious Victoria Sterling. But he was not a mouse, and he did not appreciate being made to feel like one. "No, ma'am," he said, his voice firmer now. "I have been trying to do my job well and respectfully. The 4 men before me did not last 2 weeks. I would like to last longer. I have a daughter to support." She tilted her head slightly, studying him with a new intensity. "So you know about them, the ones who quit." He met her gaze. "Everyone knows." Her lips curved into something that was not quite a smile. It was colder than that, sharper. "Let me save you some time then," she said. Her voice was casual now, almost conversational, but there was steel beneath it. "You will quit like the rest. They always do. Men like you come in here thinking you can handle this, thinking you are tougher than the last one, but you are not. You will realize this job is beneath you, that I am too demanding, that the hours are too long and the pay is too little. You will quit, probably within the next week, so let us not waste each other's time pretending otherwise." The words hung in the air between them. A challenge and a dismissal all at once. She was giving him permission to leave, expecting him to take it, expecting him to prove her right, to confirm her cynical view of the world and everyone in it. He thought of Emma, of the small bedroom in their cramped apartment, of the electricity bill that was due in 3 days. He thought of the 237 resumes, the 3 rejections, the long months of searching and the longer nights of doubt. He thought of his wife and how she had looked at him in those final days, her hand gripping his, and made him promise that he would take care of their little girl no matter what it took. He looked at Victoria Sterling, this woman who had everything and seemed to trust nothing, and he said the only thing he could say, the only thing that was true: "No, ma'am, I will not quit. You can fire me if you like, but I will not quit. This job is not beneath me. No honest work is beneath me. I am here for my daughter, and I will do whatever it takes to provide for her. So if you want me gone, you will have to make that decision yourself, but I'm not going anywhere." The silence that followed was absolute. Victoria Sterling stared at him, her expression frozen in something between shock and disbelief. No one spoke to her like this. No one refused her predictions, her assessments, her judgments. She was Victoria Sterling. She was always right. And yet this janitor, this nobody with a squeaky cart and cleaning supplies, had just told her no, had just looked her in the eye and declared her wrong. Her lips parted slightly as if to respond, but no words came. For the first time in perhaps a decade, Victoria Sterling was speechless. The tension in Victoria Sterling's office could have been cut with a knife. Marcus stood there, his hand still gripping his cleaning cart, wondering if he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. His heart hammered against his ribs, but he kept his expression neutral, his shoulders square. He had meant every word he said, even if those words had just sealed his fate. He could not afford to show weakness now, not when he had already crossed the line into defiance. Victoria's eyes narrowed slightly, and for a moment Marcus thought he saw something flicker across her face. It was not anger, at least not the explosive kind he had been expecting. It was something else. Something more complex. Calculation, perhaps, or curiosity. She took a step back, creating distance between them, and crossed her arms over her chest. The gesture was defensive, which surprised him. He had not imagined the great Victoria Sterling ever feeling the need to defend herself from anyone, least of all a janitor. "Fine," she said finally, her voice clipped. "You want to stay? Quote, then stay. But understand this. I work late every night. I am here until 2, sometimes 3 in the morning, and I cannot concentrate with noise, with interruptions, with the smell of ammonia and lemon cleaner choking the air while I am trying to think. So if you are going to insist on keeping this job, you will have to figure out a way to do it without disturbing. Can you manage that?" It was a test, Marcus realized. She was giving him an impossible task, setting him up to fail so that when he inevitably could not meet her demands, she could say she had given him a chance. She would be proven right after all, and he would be gone. But as he looked around her massive office at the glass walls and the marble floors and the pristine surfaces, an idea began to form. It was risky, and it would mean even longer hours, but it might just work. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "I can manage that." She raised one perfectly sculpted eyebrow, skepticism written all over her face. "Really? And how exactly do you plan to clean this office without making noise or using cleaning products?" He took a breath, committing himself to the plan that was still forming in his mind. "I will clean your office during the day, before you arrive. The building opens at 6 in the morning for security and maintenance staff. I will come in early, clean the executive suite between 6 and 8, and then go home to take my daughter to school. I will return for my regular night shift to clean the rest of the building." Victoria stared at him as if he had just suggested flying to the moon. "You are proposing to work 2 shifts. That is insane." "It is not 2 full shifts," he corrected. "It is 2 hours in the morning and 8 at night. I can do it." He did not mention that it would mean sleeping only 4 hours a night. He did not mention that he would be exhausted, that he would be running on fumes and caffeine and sheer determination. She did not need to know that. She only needed to know that he would do the job. For a long moment, she said nothing. She simply stood there, her arms still crossed, studying him with those sharp, analytical eyes. He had the distinct impression that she was peeling back layers, trying to see what he was made of, trying to understand what would drive a man to such lengths. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter, less certain than it had been before. "Why?" The question caught him off guard. "Why? What? Why are you willing to kill yourself for a minimum wage job? You said you have a daughter. What about her? Does she not need a father who is awake, who is present? You cannot be much use to her if you are working yourself into an early grave." There was something in her tone that made him pause, something that sounded almost like genuine concern beneath the harshness. He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw for the first time the exhaustion that lined her face, the shadows under her eyes that even expensive concealer could not quite hide. This was a woman who understood working oneself into the ground. This was a woman who had built an empire on sleepless nights and relentless drive. And perhaps, he thought, this was a woman who was asking him a question she had once asked herself. "My daughter needs food," he said simply. "She needs a home. She needs stability. I can give her those things if I have this job. As for being present, I am there every morning to make her breakfast. I walk her to school. I pick her up every afternoon. We do her homework together. I read her stories at night. I'm there for every moment that matters. The hours in between, the hours I spend here, those are the price I pay to make sure she has a future." Victoria's expression shifted. The hard edges softened just slightly, and something that looked almost like pain crossed her face. She turned away from him, walking back to the windows, her silhouette once again framed by the city lights. When she spoke, her voice was distant, as if she were talking more to herself than to him. "I had a daughter once," she said. The words hung in the air, fragile and unexpected. Marcus felt his breath catch. Had, past tense. He did not know what to say, did not know if he was meant to respond at all. "She is 14 now," Victoria continued, still facing the window. "She lives with her father in Boston. I see her twice a year if I am lucky, 3 times if I am not needed for some crucial meeting or merger or crisis. She stopped calling me Mom when she was 11. Now she calls me Victoria, if she calls me anything at all. The last time we spoke, she told me she was going to a father-daughter dance at her school. She said it very matter-of-factly, as if it were not a knife to my heart, as if I had not spent 14 years choosing this office, this company, this empire over her." Marcus stood frozen, unsure how to navigate this sudden, startling vulnerability. This was not the woman who had just predicted his failure with cold certainty. This was someone else, someone who had made choices and was living with their consequences in a way that clearly haunted her. He thought of Emma, of her bright laugh and her total, unshakable faith in him, and he could not imagine a world in which she stopped calling him Daddy. "I am telling you this," Victoria said, turning back to face him, "because you seem like a good father, and good fathers are rare. So before you destroy yourself trying to work 20 hours a day, think about what you might be sacrificing. Think about the moments you will miss because you are too tired to notice them. I did not think about those things when I was building this company. I told myself I was doing it for her future, for the legacy I would leave her. But the truth is, I was doing it for myself, and now she does not want anything to do with me or the legacy I built." The raw honesty of her words left him momentarily speechless. He had expected a tyrant, a corporate automaton without empathy or emotion. Instead, he was facing a woman who had gained the world and lost what mattered most. It made him see her differently, made him understand that her coldness, her impossible standards, were perhaps not born of cruelty but of regret. She was warning him not to make the same mistakes she had made. She was trying, in her own broken way, to protect him from himself. "I appreciate the warning," Marcus said carefully, "and I am sorry for your loss. Truly, but my situation is different. I am not choosing between my daughter and my ambition. I am choosing between feeding her and starving. I am choosing between a roof over her head and the street. This is not about building an empire. This is about survival. And if I have to sacrifice sleep to keep her safe, then that is what I will do." Victoria studied him for another long moment, and then, to his complete astonishment, she nodded. "All right," she said. "You may implement your plan. You will clean the executive suite between 6 and 8 each morning, but," and she held up one finger in warning, "if I find that the quality of your work suffers, if I see that you are too exhausted to do the job properly, the arrangement ends immediately. Understood?" "Understood," Marcus said, relief flooding through him. "Thank you, Miss Sterling." She waved a hand dismissively, turning back to her desk. "Do not thank me. Just prove me wrong. That will be thanks enough. Now leave. I have 3 hours of work left, and you have wasted enough of my time." He turned to go, pushing his cart back toward the door, but her voice stopped him. "Marcus." It was the first time she had used his first name. He looked back. She was standing by her desk, one hand resting on a stack of files, and there was something almost vulnerable in her posture. Something that contradicted the steel in her voice. "Your daughter," she said quietly. "What is her name?" "Emma," he answered. "Emma Chun." Victoria nodded slowly, as if filing the information away. "Take care of her, Marcus. Do not let this place, this job, this city, steal her from you the way it stole mine from me." "I will not," he promised. And he meant it with every fiber of his being. He left the office and wheeled his cart toward the elevator, his mind reeling from the strange, surreal conversation. He had expected to be fired. Instead, he had been given permission to work himself into the ground, and he had received a warning wrapped in grief from a woman who seemed to see in him a version of herself, a chance to prevent history from repeating. As the elevator descended, carrying him back down to the world of supply closets and industrial mops, Marcus realized that he had not just survived his encounter with Victoria Sterling. He had somehow, inexplicably, earned a sliver of her respect. The alarm clock screamed at 4:30 in the morning, a shrill mechanical assault that dragged Marcus from the thin sleep he had managed to steal. He slapped at it blindly, his hand finally finding the button that brought blessed silence. For a moment he lay there in the darkness of his small bedroom, every muscle in his body begging him to stay horizontal, to ignore the demands of the day and sink back into unconsciousness. But then he heard the soft sound of Emma's breathing from the room next door, that gentle rhythmic whisper that reminded him why he was doing this, and he forced himself upright. His body protested every movement. He had gotten home at 2 in the morning, had fallen into bed without even removing his shoes, and had slept for exactly 2.5 hours. Now he had to shower, dress, and be at Sterling Dynamics by 6 to begin the new arrangement he had negotiated with Victoria Sterling. It felt insane in the cold pre-dawn darkness. It felt impossible, but he had made a promise, and Marcus Chun did not break promises. The shower was scalding hot, an attempt to shock his system into something resembling alertness. He stood under the spray, his forehead pressed against the tile wall, and tried to calculate how sustainable this schedule actually was. 4 hours of sleep if he was lucky, more likely 3. He could do it for a while, he told himself. A few months, maybe a year, just until he found something better. Something with normal hours and a salary that would not require him to work himself into an early grave. The problem was, he had been telling himself that same lie for 8 months now, and nothing better had materialized. He dressed in the same worn jeans and faded polo shirt that constituted his work uniform, grabbed his keys and his building access card, and paused at Emma's door. He pushed it open quietly, just enough to see her small form curled up under her blankets, her favorite stuffed rabbit clutched to her chest. She looked so peaceful, so innocent, so utterly unaware of how hard he was fighting to keep the world at bay. He wanted to wake her up, to hold her, to remind himself what this exhaustion was for, but it was too early and she needed her sleep. Instead, he whispered a soft "I love you" into the darkness and pulled the door closed. The city at 5 in the morning was a strange, liminal place. The streets were nearly empty, occupied only by delivery trucks and the occasional taxi carrying someone home from a night shift or a regrettable decision. The subway was populated by ghosts, tired-eyed people who existed in the space between night and day, the workers who kept the city functioning while everyone else slept. Marcus joined their ranks, swaying gently as the train rattled through tunnels, his eyes closed but his mind refusing to rest. He thought about Victoria Sterling's office, about the woman who had stood silhouetted against the city lights and confessed to losing her daughter. He thought about the pain in her voice when she had spoken about the father-daughter dance, about the way she had used her daughter's name in the past tense, as if the girl were dead rather than simply distant. It made him hold Emma tighter in his mind, made him more determined than ever to never let that distance grow between them. Sterling Dynamics looked different in the early morning light. The sun was just beginning to creep over the horizon, painting the glass and steel tower in shades of gold and pink. The building was almost beautiful like this, before it filled with people and ambition and the relentless machinery of commerce. Marcus badged in through the employee entrance, nodding to the security guard who looked surprised to see a janitor arriving so early. The man checked his computer, confirmed that Marcus had authorization to be there, and waved him through. The executive suite on the 42nd floor was empty and silent. The lights were off, The office is vacant. The only sound the gentle hum of the climate control system. Marcus wheeled his cart out of the elevator and took a moment to simply stand there, to appreciate the strange peace of the space. Then he got to work. He started with Victoria's office, the room that would set the tone for everything else. He worked quickly but carefully, dusting every surface, polishing the glass walls until running the vacuum over the carpet with smooth, efficient strokes. He used unscented cleaning product, mindful of her complaint about the smell of ammonia and lemon. The work was meditative in its way. A series of practiced movements that required no thought, only muscle memory. He found himself noticing details he had not seen the night before. The framed photograph on her desk turned face down as if the image were too painful to look at. The shelf of books, all business and leadership titles except for one slim volume of poetry tucked in the corner. The view from her windows, which in daylight revealed not just the city but the river beyond it, a ribbon of gray-blue cutting through the urban landscape. By 7:30, the executive suite was spotless. Marcus stood in the doorway of Victoria's office, surveying his work with a critical eye. It looked good, better than good. It looked like no one had ever been there at all, which he supposed was the point. He was meant to be invisible, to maintain the illusion that these spaces cleaned themselves through some form of corporate magic. He checked his watch. He had 30 minutes to get home, wake Emma, make her breakfast, and get her ready for school. It would be tight, but he could do it. He was loading his cart back onto the elevator when he heard the distinctive sound of heels clicking on marble. His heart sank. It was barely 7:45. She was not supposed to be here yet. He turned, and there she was. Victoria Sterling, walking toward him with a paper coffee cup in each hand and an expression of surprise on her face that mirrored his own. They stared at each other for a moment. Both caught off guard, both clearly not expecting this encounter. "You were early," she said finally. It sounded almost like an accusation. "So are you," he replied, then mentally kicked himself. That had sounded far too familiar, too flippant. He should have said Miss Sterling with proper deference, but she did not seem offended. Instead, she held out one of the coffee cups. "I brought two," she said, force of habit from when I had an assistant who did not quit. "I assume you drink coffee. Most people who work the hours you are working survive on little else." He took the cup, too surprised to refuse. "Thank you." She nodded curtly, then walked past him toward her office. He heard her pause, heard the small sound of surprise she made when she saw the room. After a moment, she appeared back in the doorway, looking at him with an expression he could not quite read. "It is perfect," she said quietly. "You did good work." "Thank you," he said again, unsure what else to say. She looked at him for another long moment, then nodded. "Go home, Marcus. Go be with your daughter. I will see you tonight." It became a routine. Every morning at 6, Marcus would arrive at the empty building and clean the executive suite. Every morning at 7:45, Victoria would arrive early with 2 cups of coffee, one for her and one for him. They never spoke beyond pleasantries, never crossed the boundary between employer and employee, but there was a strange companionship in their shared exhaustion. They were two people operating at the extremes of the human capacity for work, and there was a mutual respect in that. By the end of the second week, Marcus was running on pure adrenaline and stubbornness. His body had stopped protesting and moved into a state of numb acceptance. He slept in short, dreamless bursts. He consumed coffee like it was oxygen. He moved through his days in a fog, present for Emma, but not entirely there, his mind always somewhere else, calculating how many hours until he could sleep again, how many more days he could sustain this before something broke. Emma noticed. Of course she noticed. She was 6 years old, but she was observant and intuitive in the way children often are. One morning, as he was making her breakfast, she climbed up onto the kitchen counter and put her small hands on either side of his face, forcing him to look at her. "Daddy," she said seriously, "you look like the zombies in that movie we are not supposed to watch, but I saw at Lily's house." He had laughed, despite himself, despite the bone-deep exhaustion. "I am fine, sweetie. Just a little tired." She frowned, unconvinced. "Mrs. Chun says you work too hard. Mrs. Chun is a wise woman, but Daddy has to work to take care of us." Emma had not looked satisfied, but she had dropped the subject, sliding off the counter to eat her cereal. But Marcus had seen the worry in her eyes, and it had haunted him all day. He was doing this for her, to give her stability and security, but what good was any of that if he was too exhausted to truly be present? What good was a father who was physically there but mentally absent, running on fumes and caffeine? He thought of Victoria's words, her warning not to make the same mistakes she had made, and he wondered if he was already too far down that path to turn back. On the Friday of his third week, everything changed. Marcus arrived at 6 as usual, wheeled his cart out of the elevator as usual, and headed toward Victoria's office. But when he reached the door, he found it already open. The lights were on, and Victoria Sterling was sitting at her desk, still wearing the same clothes he had seen her in the night before, her eyes red-rimmed and exhausted. She looked up when he entered, and he saw immediately that something was very wrong. She had been crying. Victoria Sterling, the iron woman of the corporate world, had been sitting alone in her office crying. "Miss Sterling," he said carefully, "are you all right?" She laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "No, Marcus, I'm not all right. I've not been all right for a very long time, but I am usually better at hiding it." She gestured vaguely at her computer screen. "I just spent the entire night trying to write an email to my daughter, trying to find the words to tell her I will miss her birthday again because I have a board meeting in London that I cannot reschedule. It is the 3rd birthday I have missed in a row. At what point does she stop having birthdays for me? At what point does she stop existing in my life at all? Marcus stood there, his cleaning cart forgotten, and looked at this powerful woman who seemed to be collapsing in on herself. He thought about what he should do, what was appropriate, what his role was in this moment. He was the janitor. She was the CEO. There were lines, boundaries, rules. But then he thought about Emma, about what he would want someone to do if she were the one sitting alone in an office, drowning in regret and grief. He made a decision. He walked over to her desk, pulled out the chair across from her, and sat down. Victoria looked up at him with something like shock on her face. Marcus had violated an unspoken rule by sitting down uninvited, by inserting himself into her personal crisis, by presuming that he had any right to be there at all. But he did not stand up. He did not apologize. He simply sat there, his hands folded on the polished surface of her desk, and waited. For a long moment, she said nothing. She just stared at him, her red-rimmed eyes searching his face for something, some judgment or pity that she clearly expected to find. When she did not see it, something in her seemed to break further, the last wall crumbling. "I do not know why I'm telling you this," she said, her voice hoarse from exhaustion and tears. "You are the janitor. I should not be burdening you with my problems. But there is no one else to tell. I have spent my entire adult life building this company, acquiring wealth and power and influence, and I have surrounded myself with people who want something. Employees who want promotions, board members who want profits, competitors who want me to fail. I do not have friends, Marcus. I have assets and liabilities, and I have forgotten how to tell the difference." Marcus listened without interrupting, letting her speak. He recognized this moment for what it was. She did not need advice. She did not need solution. She just needed someone to bear witness to her pain, to acknowledge that it existed, that it mattered. He had sat in similar chairs across from his wife during her illness, listening to her fears and regrets in the dark hours of the night. He knew the value of simple presence, of not trying to fix everything, of just being there. "My daughter's name is Sophie," Victoria continued, her voice soft now, almost tender. "She is brilliant, gets straight A's, plays violin, speaks 3 languages. She is everything I wanted to be at her age, but never had the resources or opportunities to become. And she hates me, not with passion or anger anymore. That would almost be better. She hates me with indifference, with the kind of cold dismissal that makes it clear I have become irrelevant in her life. When I call, she answers out of obligation and counts the minutes until she can hang up. When I send gifts, she sends perfunctory thank you notes that I know her father forces her to write." She picked up a frame from her desk. The one Marcus had noticed was always face down, and turned it toward him. The photograph showed a younger version of Victoria, perhaps 10 years ago, holding a small girl with dark curly hair and a bright, trusting smile. They were at what looked like a beach, both wearing sundresses, both laughing at something outside the frame. The joy in the image was almost painful to witness, knowing what had been lost. "That was the last good day," Victoria said quietly. She was 4. "We spent the entire day building sandcastles and collecting shells. I told myself I would do it more often, that I would make time for more days like that. But I never did. The company was growing so fast, and I convinced myself that if I could just get through this crisis, this merger, this product launch, then I would have time. But there was always another crisis, another merger, another launch. And Sophie grew up without me." Marcus looked at the photograph, at the little girl who had become a stranger, and he felt a chill run down his spine. He saw his own future in that image if he was not careful. Emma at 14, distant and cold, speaking to him out of obligation rather than love. He thought of the exhaustion he was carrying, the way he had been sleepwalking through their morning routines, present in body but absent in mind. He thought of Victoria's warning from weeks ago, delivered from the other side of a chasm she had already fallen into, and he understood now why she had given it. "When did it change?" he asked gently. "When did she stop being that little girl in the photograph?" Victoria set the frame down carefully as if it were made of glass. Her divorce had been finalized when Sophie was 8. Her ex-husband, a moderately successful artist named David, had primary custody because Victoria traveled too much, worked too late, could not provide the stable home environment a child needed. She had agreed to the arrangement, telling herself it was temporary, that once she stabilized the company she would fight for more custody. But the years had passed and she had never fought. She had sent money instead of time, gifts instead of presents, and Sophie had learned that her mother was someone who showed up on a screen rather than in person. The breaking point, Victoria said, came 3 years ago. Sophie was 11 and it was her school's career day. Parents were invited to come speak about their jobs, to show the children what the adult world looked like. Sophie asked me to come. She wrote me a letter, an actual handwritten letter, telling me how important it was to her, how all her friends' parents were coming, how she wanted to show me off because her mom was a CEO and that was cool. Victoria's voice cracked and she paused, taking a shaky breath before continuing. "I was in Tokyo for a conference. A very important conference that would determine whether we secured a contract worth hundreds of millions of dollars. I told myself I could not leave, that Sophie would understand, that there would be other career days. But there were not. The next year, she did not ask, and the year after that, she stopped asking for anything at all." Marcus felt the weight of that missed moment, the single decision that had become the point of no return. He thought about all the small decisions he made every day. The moments he chose work over Emma, exhaustion over presence. How many of those moments could accumulate before they became a pattern, before they became who he was to his daughter? "Did you apologize?" he asked. "Did you tell her you made a mistake?" Victoria let out a bitter laugh. "Of course I apologized. I sent her an expensive gift. a necklace with her birthstone. I called her and told her I was sorry I missed it, that next time I would be there, but my apologies had become meaningless by then. They were just words, empty promises that I never kept. Sophie thanked me for the necklace with that same polite, distant voice she uses now, and I knew in that moment that I had lost her. The office fell silent except for the gentle hum of the building's ventilation system. Marcus sat there absorbing the tragedy of Victoria's story, and he realized that she had given him a gift, not intentionally perhaps, but a gift nonetheless. She had shown him the end of the road he was currently traveling, the destination that awaited him if he did not change course. He could see it so clearly now, the way exhaustion and obligation could slowly erode love, the way good intentions could pave a path to devastating loss. "Miss Sterling," he said carefully, "may I ask you something?" She nodded, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand in a gesture that was almost childlike. "Why are you still doing this? Why are you still working these impossible hours, still sacrificing everything for a company that will never love you back when you know what it cost you?" She looked at him, and for the first time since he had met her, he saw genuine confusion on her face, as if the question had never occurred to her before. "Because I do not know how to do anything else," she said finally. "This company is all I have left. Without it, I am just a woman who failed at the only thing that truly mattered. At least here in this office, I am successful. I am powerful. I am respected, if not loved. Out there in the real world, I am just a mother who abandoned her child for profit margins and quarterly reports." She looked around at the pristine office, at the awards on the walls, at the expensive furniture and the breathtaking view. What would I even do if I stopped? Who would I be? Marcus understood then that Victoria Sterling was trapped in a prison of her own making. She could not go back and undo her choices, could not reclaim the years she had missed. So she stayed in the only place where those choices felt justified, where her sacrifices had meaning, where the cost of her success was hidden behind glass walls and profit statements. She had become a cautionary tale, a ghost haunting the building she had built, and she did not know how to escape. "You could start now," Marcus said quietly. "You could send that email and tell your daughter the truth. Not excuses, not apologies wrapped in justifications, just the truth. That you made terrible choices. That you let fear and ambition blind you. That you are sorry in a way that actually means something. And then you could get on a plane to Boston and show up for her birthday. You could prove that you mean it this time." Victoria stared at him as if he had suggested she jump off the building. "The board meeting," she began. "Let the board wait," Marcus interrupted, his voice firm. "Let them reschedule. Let them be inconvenienced for once. What is the worst that could happen? They fire you. You have more money than you could spend in 10 lifetimes. You do not need this job anymore, Miss Sterling. But your daughter still needs a mother, if you have not left it too late." The words hung in the air between them, a challenge and a plea. Victoria opened her mouth to respond, to offer some argument about responsibility and duty and shareholders, but no words came out. Instead, tears began to flow again, silent and steady, running down her cheeks and dripping onto the polished surface of her desk. Marcus reached across the desk and did something he would never have imagined doing 3 weeks ago. He took her hand. Her fingers were cold, trembling, and she gripped his hand like a drowning person gripping a lifeline. "I am so tired," she whispered. "I am so tired of being alone." "Then stop being alone," he said simply. "Sophie is 14. You still have time. Not much, but some. The question is whether you are brave enough to use it." She looked at him, really looked at him, and he saw the moment when something shifted inside her. It was not a dramatic transformation, not a sudden revelation. It was quieter than that. Smaller. It was the first crack in the armor she had worn for so long, the first tiny opening through which light could enter. "Will you help me write the email?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Marcus squeezed her hand gently. "Yes," he said. "But first let me make us some more coffee. We are going to need it." They spent the next hour crafting an email that was unlike anything Victoria Sterling had ever written. There were no corporate pleasantries, no carefully constructed sentences designed to project strength and control. Instead, it was raw and honest, a mother's confession to a daughter she had failed. Marcus sat beside her as she typed, offering gentle suggestions when she slipped into formal language, reminding her to speak from the heart rather than the head. The email began simply. "Sophie, I have missed your birthday 3 years in a row. I have made excuses each time, told myself and you that work was too important, that I would make it up to you, that you would understand. But the truth is, I have been a coward. I have been hiding behind this company because facing what I have done to us, to you, was too painful." Victoria's hands trembled as she typed, and several times she had to stop and wipe tears from her eyes before continuing. Marcus watched her struggle with each word, each admission, and he felt a strange mixture of sadness and hope. This was what courage looked like, he realized. Not the boardroom bravado or the corporate conquests, but this quiet, painful honesty. This was a woman dismantling her own defenses brick by brick and allowing herself to be vulnerable. The email continued, and with each paragraph, Victoria's voice became clearer, more genuine. She wrote about the career day she had missed, about how she had known even then that it was a turning point, but had convinced herself the conference was more important. She wrote about the photo on her desk, the one from the beach, and how she looked at it every day and remembered when Sophie had loved her without reservation. I cannot undo the past, Victoria typed, her fingers moving slowly across the keyboard. I cannot give you back the years I stole from us, but I can show up now. I'm canceling my board meeting in London. I'm getting on a plane this afternoon and I'm coming to Boston for your birthday. I know this does not fix anything. I know one visit does not erase 3 years of absence. But I need you to know that you are more important than any meeting, any contract, any amount of money. You always were. I was just too blind to see it. Marcus read over her shoulder, and when she finished, he nodded. That is good, he said quietly. That is real. Victoria stared at the screen for a long moment, her finger hovering over the send button. If I do this, she said, her voice uncertain, if I send this and she does not respond, if she tells me not to come, I do not know if I can survive that. Then at least you will know you tried, Marcus said gently. At least you will know you were brave enough to be honest. And maybe that is all you can do right now. She took a deep breath and pressed send. The email disappeared from the screen, launched into the digital void, carrying with it a mother's desperate hope for redemption. Victoria sat back in her chair, exhaling slowly, and for a moment she looked lighter, as if the weight of unshed confession had been pressing her down and was now finally released. What happens now, she asked. Now we wait, Marcus said, and you start making phone calls. You need to cancel that board meeting, book a flight, and probably warn your ex-husband that you are coming. She looked at him with something like panic. David will be suspicious. He will think I'm going to disrupt Sophie's life again, make promises I will not keep. He has every reason to think that, Marcus said honestly. So prove him wrong. Show up and keep showing up. Actions matter more than words, especially when your words have been empty for so long. Victoria nodded slowly, then reached for her phone. Marcus stood up, sensing that this next part was something she needed to do alone. He moved back to his cleaning cart, intending to give her privacy, but her voice stopped him. Marcus, she said, and when he turned back he saw that her expression had shifted into something more composed, more like the CEO he recognized. Thank you for sitting with me, for not judging me, for helping me find the courage to at least try. You do not have to thank me, he said. Just go be with your daughter. That will be thanks enough. She smiled then, a small, fragile thing, but genuine. It was the first real smile he had seen from her. He left her office and finished his cleaning rounds in the other executive suites, his mind only half on his work. He kept thinking about Victoria's story, about Sophie, about the paths not taken and the moments that defined a life. When he finally left the building at 8:15, he was running late for getting Emma to school, but for once he did not care. He practically ran to the subway, his exhaustion temporarily forgotten, driven by a sudden, urgent need to see his daughter, to hold her, to reassure himself that he still had time to get it right. Emma was sitting at the kitchen table when he burst through the door, already dressed in her school uniform, her backpack beside her chair. Mrs. Chun was with her, having let herself in with the spare key to make sure Emma had breakfast. The elderly woman looked at Marcus with knowing eyes as he swept Emma up into his arms, hugging her so tightly that she squeaked in protest. "Daddy, you are squishing me." Emma laughed, but she wrapped her small arms around his neck and hugged him back just as fiercely. "Missed you," he said into her hair. "I saw you this morning," she said, confused. "I know. I just missed you anyway." Merce Chun gathered her things quietly and slipped out the door, giving them privacy. Emma pulled back to look at her father's face, her small hands framing his cheeks. "You look different," she said. "Less zombie, more like regular daddy." He laughed, the sound coming from deep in his chest, a release of tension he had not realized he was carrying. "I feel more like regular daddy," he said. "Come on. Let us get you to school." As they walked through their neighborhood, Emma's small hand in his, Marcus made a decision. He would finish out his notice period at Sterling Dynamics, but then he would find something else. Something with daylight hours and a schedule that allowed him to be present for his daughter. He did not care if it paid less. He did not care if it was beneath his qualifications. What mattered was time, the finite and precious resource he could never get back once it was spent. He would not make Victoria's mistakes. He would not sacrifice his daughter's childhood on the altar of survival. There had to be another way, and he would find it. When he returned to the building that night for his regular shift, there was a note waiting for him at the security desk. It was in an envelope with his name written in elegant script. He opened it carefully, and inside was a single piece of company letterhead. "Marcus," the note read, "I am at the airport. My flight leaves in 2 hours. I do not know what will happen when I get to Boston, but I know I would not be going at all if you had not sat with me this morning. You saved my life today, or at least you gave me a chance to save what is left of it. I am increasing your salary, effective immediately, to $50,000 a year. Before you refuse, know that this is not charity. This is me paying you what your counsel is worth. You are wiser than any consultant I have ever hired, and you have more integrity than anyone in this building. Thank you for reminding me what matters. Victoria." Marcus stared at the note, his hands shaking. $50,000. It was more than he had made as a junior engineer, more than he had hoped to make for years. It was enough to move to a better apartment, to put money away for Emma's future, to stop working himself into the ground. It was impossible. It was overwhelming. It was a lifeline thrown thrown across the chasm of his desperation. He folded the note carefully and put it in his pocket, then stood there in the empty lobby, trying to process what had just happened. His life had changed in the space of a morning, shifted on its axis by a conversation he had never intended to have. He had gone to work expecting to push a mop and instead had become a confidant to a billionaire, a voice of conscience in a moment of crisis. And now he had a salary that would allow him to give Emma the stability she deserved without sacrificing his own health and sanity. The night shift felt different after that. As Marcus cleaned the floors and emptied the trash cans, he moved with a lightness he had not felt in years. The building no longer felt like a prison or a purgatory. It felt like a place where something good had happened, where two broken people had found a moment of connection and both had walked away chained. He thought about Victoria on a plane to Boston, probably terrified, probably rehearsing what she would say to Sophie. He thought about the courage it took to admit failure, to try to rebuild something that had been shattered, to choose love over pride. And he thought about Emma, asleep in their apartment, waiting for him to come home. 3 days passed before he heard anything from Victoria. He continued his morning routine, cleaning the executive suite in the pre-dawn hours, but her office remained empty. He wondered if she had stayed in Boston, if the reunion with Sophie had gone well or poorly, if she would ever come back to Sterling Dynamics at all. Then, on Wednesday morning, as he was polishing the glass walls of the conference room, he heard the elevator doors open. He turned, and there she was. Victoria Sterling looked different. She was wearing jeans and a simple sweater, her hair pulled back in a casual ponytail. She looked younger somehow, less severe, and there was something in her eyes that had not been there before. A softness, a hope, tentative peace. She walked toward him, and he could see she had been crying, but these were different tears than the ones he had witnessed in her office. These were the tears of someone who had survived something difficult and come out the other side. "Marcus," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I stayed for her birthday. I met her friends. I sat through an entire dinner with her and David without checking my phone once, and when it was time for me to leave, Sophie hugged me. It was brief and awkward and probably driven more by social obligation than genuine affection, but she hugged me, and she said maybe I could come visit again next month. Maybe, Marcus. That is more than I have had in 3 years." Marcus smiled, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. "That is wonderful, Miss Sterling." She shook her head. "Please," she said, "call me Victoria. I think we are past formalities, do you not?" He nodded. "Victoria." She looked around the empty building at the gleaming floors and spotless windows. "I am making some changes," she said. "I am stepping back from day-to-day operations. I am appointing a coup to handle the things that kept me here until 3 in the morning. I am going to work reasonable hours and spend my weekends in Boston, at least for a while, trying to build back what I destroyed. It is going to be slow, and it might not work, but I have to try." The changes at Sterling Dynamics came swiftly and decisively, which was Victoria's way. Within 2 weeks, she had restructured the executive team, delegating responsibilities that she had previously guarded jealously. The board was initially resistant, concerned that their fearless leader was losing her edge, becoming soft. But Victoria faced them with the same steel she had always possessed, only now it was tempered with something else. Clarity, perhaps, or wisdom. She told them plainly that she was choosing to work smarter rather than longer, and if they did not approve, they were welcome to find another CEO. The threat was enough. No one on that board wanted to try to replace Victoria Sterling. For Marcus, the salary increase transformed everything. He gave notice on his night shifts, keeping only the morning cleaning routine for the executive suite. Victoria had insisted on it, claiming that no one else could clean her office to her exacting standards, though they both knew it was more than that. Their early morning encounters had become something both of them looked forward to, a quiet ritual that grounded them before the chaos of their days began. He used the extra time and money to enroll Emma in after-school programs she had only dreamed of before. Piano lessons, art classes, soccer on Saturdays. He watched his daughter bloom, her natural exuberance given room to expand, and he was present for all of it. The friendship between Marcus and Victoria deepened in ways that surprised them both. She began asking his advice on matters that had nothing to do with cleaning, questions about parenting and balance, and how to be present when every instinct told her to solve problems rather than simply sit with them. He found himself looking forward to their conversations, to the way she listened with total focus, to the sharp intelligence she brought even to discussions about 6-year-old birthday parties. They were an unlikely pair, the billionaire CEO and the janitor with an engineering degree, but they understood each other in ways that transcended their different worlds. One morning in late October, Marcus arrived at the building to find Victoria already in her office, which was unusual. She typically arrived after he had finished cleaning. She was sitting at her desk with her head in her hands, and even from the doorway he could see the tension in her shoulders. He knocked softly on the glass wall and she looked up. Her face was pale, her eyes ringed with the kind of exhaustion he recognized from his own mirror during those brutal 20-hour days. "What happened?" he asked, setting down his cleaning supplies and walking in without waiting for permission. Their relationship had evolved past the need for such formalities. "Sophie wants to come stay with me for Thanksgiving," Victoria said, her voice tight with panic. "She called last night and asked if she could spend the entire week here instead of with David. She said she wants to see where I work, where I live, who I have become, and I am terrified, Marcus. I've been visiting her on weekends, having dinner with her, but that is on her territory, in her world. This is different. This is her coming into my life, seeing how empty it is, How sterile and work-focused everything is. What if she gets here and realizes I have not actually changed at all? Marcus pulled out the chair across from her desk and sat down, the same chair he had sat in months ago when she'd been crying over a birthday email. Why do you think you have not changed? He asked quietly. Victoria gestured around her office at the pristine surfaces and the award plaques and the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Look at this place. Look at my apartment. Everything is glass and steel and empty spaces. There is nothing warm, nothing that says a child is welcome here. Sophie is 14. She's going to take one look at my life and see that I still do not have room for her in it. So make room, Marcus said simply. You have 3 weeks until Thanksgiving. That is plenty of time. Victoria stared at him. I do not know how. I have never known how. My entire adult life has been about efficiency, about eliminating anything that does not serve a purpose. How do I make a space that is welcoming when I do not know what welcome looks like? Marcus thought for a moment, then pulled out his phone. Let me show you something, he said, scrolling through his photos. He turned the screen toward her, showing a picture of his apartment. It was small and cluttered, with Emma's drawings taped to the refrigerator, a pile of her sneakers by the door, a half-finished puzzle on the kitchen table. It was chaotic and imperfect, and clearly, obviously, a home where a child was loved. This is what welcome looks like, he said gently. It is messy and imperfect and full of evidence that someone lives there, really lives there. You need to make your apartment feel less like a hotel suite and more like a place where Sophie can exist. She needs to see her presence in your space, to know that you have made room not just in your schedule but in your life. Victoria studied the photo and he watched understanding dawn on her face. Will you help me? She asked. I will pay you, of course. You do not need to pay me, Marcus said. But yes, I will help you. That is what friends do. They spent the next 3 Saturdays transforming Victoria's penthouse. Marcus brought Emma along, and together the 3 of them went shopping for things Victoria had never thought to buy. Colorful throw pillows and soft blankets. Picture frames for photographs Victoria had kept in boxes because she could not bear to look at them. A bookshelf for the guest room that would be Sophie's, stocked with young adult novels and art supplies. Emma appointed herself the chief decorator, insisting that every room needed at least one thing that made you smile when you looked at it. She chose a ceramic owl for the kitchen counter, a ridiculous fuzzy rug for the bathroom, and a mobile of paper cranes for Sophie's room. Victoria watched Emma work with a mixture of amusement and longing. The little girl was so confident, so certain of her place in the world, so secure in her father's love. It was everything Victoria wanted for Sophie, everything she hoped they could rebuild. During one of their shopping trips, as Marcus was comparing paint samples and Emma was testing the softness of every stuffed animal in the store, Victoria found herself confessing her deeper fears. What if she comes and realizes she does not like me? Victoria said quietly. Not as a mother, but as a person. What if we have nothing to talk about? What if the distance between us is too great and we just sit in awkward silence for a week? Marcus set down the paint samples and looked at her. Then you will sit in awkward silence and that will be okay. Rebuilding a relationship is not about instant connection or perfect moments. It is about showing up consistently and being willing to endure the discomfort. Sophie needs to see that you are not going to disappear again, that you can handle the hard parts, the boring parts, the parts where nothing magical happens. That is how trust is rebuilt, one awkward moment at a time. Victoria nodded, absorbing his words. She had spent her entire career solving problems, eliminating obstacles, optimizing systems. But there was no optimization strategy for love, no efficient path to redemption. There was only patience and presence and the willingness to keep trying even when it felt futile. The week before Thanksgiving, Victoria's apartment was transformed. It was still elegant, still sophisticated, but now it felt inhabited. There were photographs on the walls, books on the shelves, a couch that looked comfortable rather than just expensive. Sophie's room had been decorated with care, a balance between teenage sophistication and welcoming warmth. Emma had insisted on leaving a welcome note on the pillow, which she had written in careful block letters with numerous hearts and smiley faces. Victoria had read it and cried, then carefully placed it exactly where Emma had left it. Marcus brought Emma by the night before Sophie was due to arrive so they could see the final result. Emma ran through the apartment, inspecting every room, and declared it perfect. She looked up at Victoria with her bright, trusting eyes and said, "Your daughter is going to love it here. I would want to live here if I was her." Victoria knelt down to Emma's level, something she would never have done months ago, and said, "Thank you, sweetheart. You helped make this a home." Emma hugged her spontaneously, and Victoria held the little girl close, feeling a bittersweet ache. This was what she had missed with Sophie. These unself-conscious displays of affection, these moments of pure, uncomplicated love. That night, after Emma had gone to bed, Marcus received a text from Victoria. "I'm sitting in Sophie's room staring at Emma's note, and I am realizing something. I'm not just scared she will not like me. I am scared I will not know how to like her. What if I have forgotten how to be a mother? What if I look at her and see a stranger?" Marcus thought carefully before responding. He understood what she was asking, the deep fear beneath the words. She was afraid that she had killed the part of herself that knew how to love unconditionally, that the years of corporate ruthlessness had destroyed her capacity for maternal tenderness. He texted back, "You have not forgotten. You are just out of practice." When Sophie walks through that door, do not try to be the perfect mother or the CEO who has everything under control. Just be Victoria, the woman who made mistakes and is trying to fix them. Be honest. Be present. Be willing to fail and try again. That is all anyone can ask. And remember, you do not have to do this alone. I am one phone call away if you need someone to talk to. Her response came quickly. Thank you, Marcus, for everything. I do not know what I would have done without you these past months. You probably would have found your way, he typed, but I'm glad I could help. Now get some sleep. Tomorrow is a big day. The next morning, Marcus sent her a simple text message. You've got this. He did not expect a response, knowing she would be at the airport picking up Sophie, but hours later, a message came through. It was a photograph. Victoria and Sophie standing in the penthouse living room, both looking slightly uncomfortable but smiling tentatively at the camera. Below the image, Victoria had written, "She is here. We are here. It is awkward and terrifying and wonderful. Thank you for giving me the courage to try." Marcus showed the photo to Emma, who clapped her hands in delight. "See, Daddy?" she said. "You fixed her broken heart." He pulled his daughter close, kissing the top of her head. "No, sweetie," he said. "She fixed it herself. I just reminded her where to look for the pieces." Thanksgiving week passed in a flurry of texts from Victoria, each one documenting the small victories and setbacks of her time with Sophie. They went to a museum and Sophie actually seemed interested. They cooked dinner together and only burned the vegetables a little. They watched a movie and Sophie fell asleep on the couch with her head on Victoria's shoulder. They had a terrible argument about curfews and expectations, and Sophie locked herself in her room for 3 hours. Each message was raw and honest, showing Marcus both the progress and the pain of rebuilding what had been broken. Marcus responded to each one with patience and understanding, sometimes offering advice, sometimes just acknowledging how hard it was. He found himself thinking about Victoria and Sophie constantly, invested in their story in a way that went beyond simple friendship. He realized with some surprise that he had come to care deeply about Victoria's happiness, about her success as a mother, about the woman she was becoming as she shed the corporate armor that had protected and imprisoned her for so long. On the Saturday after Thanksgiving, Victoria asked if Marcus and Emma would like to come over for lunch. Sophie was flying back to Boston the next day, and Victoria wanted her to meet the people who had helped make the week possible. Marcus hesitated, unsure if it was appropriate, but Emma's enthusiastic yes decided for him. They arrived at the penthouse to find Victoria looking more relaxed than he had ever seen her, dressed in jeans and a comfortable sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. And there was Sophie, tall and willowy with her mother's dark hair and her father's kind eyes, looking uncertain but curious. Emma broke the ice in the way only a 6-year-old could, walking straight up to Sophie and announcing, "I helped make your room pretty. Do you like the owl lamp? I picked it out because owls are wise and you are in high school, so you probably need wisdom." Sophie's serious expression cracked into a genuine smile. "I love the owl lamp," she said, kneeling down to Emma's level. "It is my favorite thing in the room. Thank you." Emma beamed, then grabbed Sophie's hand. "Want to see my drawings? Brought some to show you. I'm a really good artist. My daddy says I get it from my mom, who is in heaven now." The innocent mention of Marcus's late wife created a moment of stillness, but Sophie handled it with surprising grace. "I would love to see your drawings," she said, letting Emma lead her toward the living room where the little girl had already spread out her artwork. Marcus watched them go, feeling a tightness in his chest. Emma mentioned her mother so rarely these days, her memories of the woman she had lost at age 3 fading into abstract concepts rather than concrete recollections. It hurt him in ways he could not articulate, this slow forgetting of the woman who had been everything to him. Victoria came to stand beside him, following his gaze to where their daughters sat together on the floor, Emma chattering away while Sophie listened with patient attention. "She is wonderful," Victoria said quietly. "Emma, she has so much light in her. You have done an incredible job with her, Marcus." He swallowed hard against the emotion rising in his throat. "I try. Some days I feel like I'm just barely holding it together, like I am one mistake away from failing her completely." Victoria turned to look at him, her expression serious. "You are not going to fail her. Do you know how I know? Because you worry about it. Bad parents do not worry. They do not question themselves or fear they are not enough. The fact that you care so deeply means she is already receiving everything she needs." They spent the afternoon together, the 4 of them, and it felt startlingly natural. They ordered pizza because no one wanted to cook, and they ate it sitting on the floor of the living room, which Emma declared was much more fun than using the fancy dining table. Sophie told stories about her school, about the violin competition she was preparing for, about her best friend who was obsessed with true crime podcasts. Emma listened with wide-eyed fascination, clearly enthralled by this older girl who was giving her attention. Victoria and Marcus watched their daughters together and exchanged glances that spoke volumes without words. This was what they were fighting for. These moments of connection and normalcy, these glimpses of what family could look like. As the afternoon stretched into evening, Sophie pulled Marcus aside while Victoria and Emma were looking at a photo album in the other room. "Can I ask you something?" Sophie said, her voice low and uncertain. "Of course," Marcus replied, giving her his full attention. Sophie hesitated, picking at a thread on her sleeve. "My mom," she began, then stopped, struggling with the words. "She has changed. Like, really changed. And I do not know if it is real or if she is just trying really hard because I am here, and when I leave, she will go back to being the person who chose board meetings over birthdays. How do I know if this is permanent?" It was a fair question, and Marcus respected her too much to offer easy platitudes. "The truth is," he he said carefully. You do not know. Not yet. Change is not a single decision. It is 1,000 small choices made every day. Your mom has made a choice to try, to show up, to prioritize you. But whether she keeps making that choice when it is hard, when work is demanding, when the old patterns try to pull her back, that remains to be seen. All you can do is give her the chance to prove herself and protect your heart while you wait to see if she does. Sophie nodded slowly, her eyes suspiciously bright. That is what my dad said too. He said I should be hopeful but careful. She looked toward the living room where Victoria was laughing at something Emma had said, the sound bright and unguarded. I want to believe she means it, I really do, but I have been disappointed so many times. Then believe it cautiously, Marcus said. Let her earn your trust back piece by piece. And if she does not, if she falls back into old patterns, know that it is not your fault. You are not responsible for her choices, good or bad. Sophie looked at him with an expression that was far too knowing for 14. You are a really good dad, she said. Emma is lucky. So is your mom, he replied. She just needed to remember that. The following Monday, Marcus arrived for his morning shift to find an email waiting for him. It was from James Whitmore, the newly appointed coup of Sterling Dynamics, requesting a meeting at 9 that morning. The tone was formal and somewhat cold, which immediately set off alarm bells. Marcus had never met Whitmore, who had been brought in from outside the company as part of Victoria's restructuring. He arrived at the executive conference room at 9 sharp. His stomach knotted with apprehension. Whitmore was a tall man in his 50s with silver hair and an expression that suggested he had never smiled in his life. Mr. Chun, Whitmore began without preamble. I have been reviewing the personnel files and payroll, and I have some concerns I need to address with you. He slid a folder across the table. You are currently earning $50,000 a year to clean the executive suite for 2 hours each morning. That is approximately $48 per hour, which is nearly 4 times the standard rate for custodial. Can you explain to me why you believe you are worth such an exorbitant salary? Marcus felt his jaw tighten. This was an ambush, a power play from someone who clearly resented Victoria's decision to pay him fairly. Miss Sterling authorized the salary increase, he said evenly. If you have concerns, you should discuss them with her. I have discussed them with her, Whitmore said, his tone dismissive, and she became quite emotional and defensive, which frankly concerns me. It suggests her judgment regarding you is impaired. I have been tasked with bringing fiscal responsibility back to this organization, and I cannot justify paying a janitor the salary of a mid-level professional. Marcus felt anger rising in his chest, hot and righteous. I am not just a janitor, he said, his voice low but firm. I have a degree in mechanical engineering from a top university. Of skills and experience that qualify me for much more than mopping floors. Miss Sterling recognized that and compensated me accordingly. Whitmore leaned back in his chair, his expression skeptical. Then why are you mopping floors at all, Mr. Chun? If you are so qualified, why are you not working in your field? The question was designed to humiliate, to put Marcus in his place, but it was a mistake. Whitmore had no idea who he was dealing with, no understanding of the sacrifices Marcus had made or the strength it had taken to survive the past 3 years. Because I spent 2 years watching my wife die of cancer, Marcus said, his voice steady and cold. Because I was her caregiver, her nurse, her companion in those final months. And I would not trade that time for any career advancement or professional opportunity, because after she died, I was a single father with a young daughter to support. And this job, the supposedly menial position you are so eager to eliminate, was the only one offered to me. Miss Sterling saw my value beyond the job title. Perhaps you should consider why you cannot do the same. Whitmore's face had gone slightly pale, but he recovered quickly, his expression hardening. Regardless of your personal circumstances, Mr. Chun, I cannot justify this salary. I am reducing your compensation to $18 per hour, effective immediately. If you find that unacceptable, you are welcome to seek employment elsewhere. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Marcus felt the ground shifting beneath him, felt the stability he had built over the past months crumbling. He thought of Emma, of the piano lessons and art classes he had finally been able to afford, of the security he had promised her. He thought of Victoria, who had fought for him, who had seen his worth when no one else had, and he thought of his own dignity, the line he would not allow anyone to cross. I will need to speak with Miss Sterling before I make any decisions, Marcus said, standing up. His hands were shaking, but he kept his voice level. This meeting is over. Whitmore's lips curved into a thin, unpleasant smile. Miss Sterling is in meetings all day, but by all means speak with her. I am quite certain she will understand that business is business, and sentiment has no place in compensation decisions. Marcus walked out of the conference room with his head high, refusing to show the fear that was churning in his gut. He went straight to Victoria's office, but her assistant informed him that she was indeed in back-to-back meetings until evening. He left a message asking her to call him as soon as possible, then went about his cleaning duties with mechanical precision, his mind racing. The call from Victoria came at 6 that evening, just as Marcus was helping Emma with her homework at their kitchen table. He saw her name flash on his phone screen and excused himself to the bedroom, closing the door behind him. Marcus, her voice came through tense and furious. I just got out of meetings and saw your message. What happened? He told her everything, keeping his voice steady even as he recounted Whitmore's dismissive tone, the arbitrary salary cut, the implication that Victoria's judgment was impaired. When he finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. He could practically hear her thinking, calculating, preparing for battle. That arrogant, short-sighted fool, she said finally, her voice vibrating with barely contained rage. I appointed him to handle operations, not to second-guess my personnel. He had no authority to cut your salary, none. Marcus felt a wave of relief wash over him, but it was tempered with concern. Victoria, he said carefully, I do not want to cause problems between you and your coup. If this becomes a fight, it might be better if I just quietly resign and find something else. Do not you dare, she snapped. Do not you dare let him bully you into leaving. You are worth every penny I pay you, and more. This is not about money, Marcus. This is about Whitmore trying to establish dominance, trying to prove that he is in charge by undermining my decisions. If I let him get away with this, he will do it again with someone else, and before long, I will have lost control of my own company. But what about your restructuring, Marcus pressed. You brought him in to help you step back, to give you more time with Sophie. If you go to war with him over this, will not that defeat the purpose? There was another pause, and when Victoria spoke again, her voice was quieter, more thoughtful. You are right. This is exactly the kind of battle I would have thrown myself into before, the kind of fight that would have consumed me for weeks. But I'm trying to be different now. I am trying to choose my battles more carefully. She took a breath, and he could hear her working through the problem in real time. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to have a conversation with Whitmore tomorrow morning. I'm going to make it very clear that you are not to be touched, that your compensation stands as is, and that if he has concerns about any of my decisions, he brings them to me first, not to the employees. But I am going to do it calmly, professionally, without turning it into a dramatic showdown. Is that acceptable? More than acceptable, Marcus said, feeling the tension in his shoulders ease slightly. Thank you, Victoria. She laughed, a short, sharp sound. You do not need to thank me for treating you with basic human decency. That should be the minimum, not something worthy of gratitude, but I am sorry you had to deal with that today. Whitmore's brilliant at operations, but he has the interpersonal skills of a brick wall. I should have briefed him better on your situation. The situation being that I am the overpaid janitor with delusions of adequacy, Marcus said, trying for humor but not quite managing it. The bitterness in his own voice surprised him. The situation being that you are my friend, Victoria said firmly, and that you have been more valuable to me in the past few months than most of the executives I have employed over the past decade. You helped me find my daughter again, Marcus. How does Whitmore propose I put a price tag on that? There was no answer to that question, so Marcus simply said, I will see you tomorrow morning then. Please, he added, do not let this become bigger than it needs to be. I mean it. Sophie needs you focused on her, not on corporate politics, I know, Victoria said softly. I'm learning to let some things go, but this, I am not letting go. Sleep well, Marcus. You too, he replied and ended the call. The next morning, Marcus arrived at Sterling Dynamics with a knot of anxiety in his stomach. He had barely slept, his mind running through scenarios, each one worse than the last. What if Victoria's conversation with Whitmore backfired? What if Whitmore decided to make Marcus's life so miserable that leaving became the only option? What if the coup convinced the board that Victoria's judgment really was impaired and used this situation as ammunition to undermine her authority? He pushed his cart off the elevator and headed toward the executive suite, and that was when he saw them. Victoria and Whitmore standing in the glass-walled conference room, clearly in the middle of a heated discussion. He could not hear what they were saying, but the body language was unmistakable. Whitmore was standing with his arms crossed, his posture rigid and defensive. Victoria was leaning forward slightly, her hands gestures as she spoke, her expression intense. Marcus paused, uncertain whether to proceed or retreat, and that was when Victoria looked up and saw him through the glass. She held up one finger, a clear signal to wait, then turned back to Whitmore and said something final and definitive. The coup's face darkened, but he nodded curtly and walked out of the conference room, brushing past Marcus without acknowledgement. Victoria emerged a moment later, her expression unreadable. She gestured for Marcus to follow her into her office, and once they were both inside, she closed the door. It is handled, she said without preamble. Your salary stand, your position is secure, and Whitmore has been reminded in no uncertain terms that personnel decisions regarding anyone in this building require my explicit approval. He was not happy about it, but he understands the boundaries now. Marcus exhaled a breath he had not realized he was holding. Thank you, I mean it. Thank you for going to bat for me. She waved a hand dismissive. Please, that barely qualifies as going to bat. I have fought much harder battles over much less important things. You are important, Marcus, to this company and to me personally. I will not allow anyone to treat you as disposable. There was something in her voice, an intensity that went beyond professional courtesy or even friendship. Marcus looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something in her eyes that made his heart skip a beat. It was gratitude, yes, but there was something else there too. Something warmer, something that spoke of feelings that neither of them had acknowledged or even fully recognized. The moment stretched between them, charged with an awareness that had been building for months but had never been named. Victoria seemed to realize it at the same moment he did, because color rose in her cheeks and she looked away. I should let you get to work, she said, her voice suddenly brisk and professional. And I have a meeting in 20 minutes that I need to prepare for. Marcus nodded, equally eager to break the tension. Right, Yes, I will just, he gestured vaguely toward his cleaning cart. She smiled, but it did not quite reach her eyes. See you tomorrow, Marcus. See you tomorrow, he echoed, and left the office feeling shaken and confused. What had just happened? Had he imagined that moment? That spark of connection that felt like something more than friendship? And if he had not imagined it, what did it mean? What could it possibly mean when she was Victoria Sterling, billionaire CEO, and he was Marcus Chun, the man who cleaned her office? He went about his work in a daze, his mind refusing to focus on the simple tasks of dusting and vacuuming. He thought about his wife, about the promise he had made to her in those final days that he would take care of Emma, that he would give their daughter a good life, that he would be both mother and father to her. He had not promised to remain alone forever, but he had also not imagined finding someone else, especially not someone like Victoria. The gulf between their worlds was vast, insurmountable. She lived in a penthouse. He lived in a 2-bedroom apartment. She flew to Boston on weekends. He took the subway to work. The idea of anything romantic developing between them was absurd, and yet there had been something in her eyes, something that mirrored what he was feeling. A loneliness, perhaps, that recognized its counterpart. A connection that had formed in the quiet hours of the morning, in the shared confidences about their daughters, in the gradual peeling away of the masks they wore for the rest of the world. He had told her things he had not told anyone, and she had trusted him with her deepest fears and regrets. Was it so impossible that friendship could become something more? By the time he got home that evening, his head was aching from the circular thoughts that had plagued him all day. Emma was waiting for him with Mrs. Chun, who took one look at his face and shoved Emma into the other room before turning to him with knowing eyes. "You look like a man with woman troubles," she said in her direct way. Ms. Chun had lived 83 years and had no patience for evasion or polite deflection. Marcus tried to protest, but she held up a hand. "I am old, not blind. There is a sadness in your eyes that was not there before, but also a light that only comes from one thing. So who is she?" "There is no she," Marcus said weakly. Mrs. Chun snorted. "Of course there is a she. The question is whether you are brave enough to do anything about it, or whether you are going to let fear keep you alone for the rest of your life. Sarah, may she rest in peace, would not want you to be alone forever. She loved you too much for that." The mention of his wife's name brought tears to Marcus's eyes. "How can I even think about someone else?" he asked, his voice breaking. "How can I betray her memory like that?" Mrs. Chun's expression softened. "Love is not betrayal, Marcus. Love is life asserting itself, reminding you that you are still here, still capable of feeling, still deserving of joy. Sarah is gone, and that is a tragedy that will never stop hurting. But you are still alive, and so is your heart. Do not bury it in the grave with her." The words struck him with the force of revelation. He had been holding on to his grief like a shield, using it to protect himself from the risk of ever being hurt again. He had convinced himself that his role was to be Emma's father, and nothing more. That any thought of his own happiness was selfish and wrong. But what if Mrs. Chun was right? What if continuing to love, continuing to open himself to connection was not betrayal but honor? What if the best way to respect Sarah's memory was to live fully, to be the man she'd always believed he could be? He spent the evening with Emma, playing games and reading stories, but his mind kept drifting back to Victoria, to the way she listened when he spoke, really listened, as if his words were the most important thing in the world, to the way she had fought for him without hesitation, protecting him from Whitmore's power play, to the way she looked in the early morning light, her guard down, her vulnerability showing through the cracks in her armor. He thought about the text messages they exchanged, about how she asked his advice on everything from parenting to paint colors, about how he had become someone she trusted and relied on, and he thought about that moment in her office, that charged silence when everything had shifted and they had both felt it. That night after Emma was asleep, Marcus sat at his small kitchen table with a cup of tea going cold in his hand. He thought about the question Mrs. Chun had posed. Was he brave enough to do anything about his feelings? The answer was complicated. He was brave enough to face down a dismissive coup, brave enough to work impossible hours to provide for his daughter, brave enough to survive the death of his wife and keep moving forward. But was he brave enough to risk his heart again? To admit that he had feelings for a woman so far out of his league that the very idea seemed like fantasy? He did not know, but he knew he could not keep pretending those feelings did not exist. December arrived with an early cold snap that turned the city into a landscape of gray slush and biting wind. Marcus continued his morning routine at Sterling Dynamics, but the easy companionship he had shared with Victoria felt strained now, weighted with everything they were both carefully not saying. Their conversations remained friendly but had become oddly formal, as if they were both afraid that one wrong word would shatter the delicate balance they had achieved. Victoria was traveling to Boston every weekend to see Sophie, and she would return on Monday mornings full of stories and cautious optimism. The relationship with her daughter was slowly, painfully improving, built on a foundation of consistent presence and honest conversation. One Friday morning, Marcus arrived to find Victoria already in her office, which was unusual. She was staring at her computer screen with an expression of such profound sadness that he immediately set down his cleaning supplies and walked in without knocking. "What happened?" he asked, his voice gentle. She looked up at him and he saw that she had been crying. "Sophie called last night," Victoria said, her voice thick. "She asked if she could come stay with me for Christmas. Not just for a few days, for the entire 2-week winter break." Marcus felt a smile spread across his face. "Victoria, that is wonderful." That is exactly what you have been hoping for. Why do you look like your world just ended? Because I am terrified, she admitted. 2 weeks is a long time. What if we run out of things to talk about? What if she gets bored? What if I fail her again and she realizes coming here was a mistake? Marcus pulled out the chair across from her desk and sat down. You are not going to fail her, he said firmly. And if there are awkward silences or moments of boredom, that is normal. That is what real family life looks like. It is not a series of perfect moments. It is just being present with each other through the mundane and the difficult as well as the good. Victoria looked at him with desperate hope. Will you help me plan activities? Things a 14-year-old would enjoy? I do not want to overschedule her, but I also do not want her sitting in my apartment feeling like a prisoner. Of course I will help, Marcus said. And I have an idea. Why do not you bring Sophie to meet Emma? They got along so well at Thanksgiving. Maybe they could spend some time together. Emma would love it, and Sophie might enjoy having someone to mentor. Victoria's face brightened. Would that be okay? I do not want to impose on your time with your daughter. You would not be imposing, Marcus assured her. Emma has been asking about Sophie constantly since Thanksgiving. She made her a Christmas card with approximately 4 pounds of glitter on it. I think she has decided Sophie is her honorary big sister. Victoria laughed, the sound watery but genuine. Then yes, I would love that. Thank you, Marcus, for everything. You keep saving me. He looked at her across the desk, at the vulnerability in her eyes, at the way she was looking at him like he was her anchor in a storm, and the words he had been holding back for weeks nearly burst out of him, but he swallowed them down, terrified of what would happen if he spoke them aloud. You are saving yourself, he said instead. I am just cheering from the sidelines. She reached across the desk and took his hand, her fingers intertwining with his. You are much more than that, she said softly. You know you are. The touch of her hand sent electricity through his entire body. He looked down at their joined hands, at the way they fit together, and he knew he was standing at a crossroads. He could pull away, maintain the safe distance of friendship, protect himself from the possibility of loss, or he could take a risk, admit the truth, and see where it led. Before he could make a decision, Victoria's phone buzzed with an incoming call. She glanced at the screen and sighed. It is Whitmore. I have to take this. Marcus nodded and stood up, breaking the contact of their hands with a sense of something important slipping away. He left her office and went about his work, but his hand still tingled where she had touched it, and his heart was racing with possibilities and fears in equal measure. That weekend, Emma created an elaborate plan for Sophie's visit that involved a trip to the ice skating, a movie marathon, and teaching Sophie how to make the world's best hot chocolate. Marcus listened to his daughter's excited chatter and felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the upcoming activities and everything to do with the woman who had brought this joy into their lives. On the day Sophie arrived, Marcus and Emma went to Victoria's penthouse laden with groceries in Emma's overnight bag. The plan was for the 4 of them to have dinner together, and then Emma would sleep over so that Sophie would have accompanied her first night in the city. When Victoria opened the door, Marcus felt his breath catch. She was wearing jeans and a soft blue sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders, and she looked younger than he had ever seen her. She looked happy. Behind her, Sophie appeared, and Emma immediately launched herself at the older girl with a squeal of delight. Sophie caught her with a laugh, lifting Emma off the ground in a hug that made Marcus's heart squeeze. They cooked dinner together, or rather, they attempted to cook dinner together. The recipe Victoria had chosen turned out to be far more complicated than anticipated, and they ended up improvising wildly, with Emma declaring herself the official taste tester and Sophie documenting the chaos with photos on her phone. At one point, Marcus and Victoria were both reaching for the same spice jar and their hands collided. They froze, looking at each other, and the kitchen seemed to contract around them. Sophie, with the perceptiveness of a teenager who had seen too much adult drama, cleared her throat loudly. So, she said, her tone deliberately casual, are you two going to keep pretending you are just friends, or are we going to acknowledge the obvious? Emma looked up from the bowl of pasta she was guarding. What is obvious? She asked innocently. That your dad and my mom like each other, Sophie said, grinning at Emma as if sharing a delicious secret. Liked each other. Emma's eyes went wide. Really? She looked from Marcus to Victoria and back again. Daddy, is that true? Do you like Miss Victoria? Marcus felt his face burning. He opened his mouth to deflect, to deny, but then he looked at Victoria and saw that she was looking back at him with an expression of hope and terror that probably mirrored his own. The moment of truth had arrived, delivered not through a romantic confession, but through the blunt observation of a 14-year-old girl who was tired of watching adults dance around the obvious. Yes, Marcus heard himself say. Yes, I do. I like her very much. The words hung in the air, and he watched Victoria's face transform. Her eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling, a bright, beautiful smile that made her look like an entirely different person. Like you too, she whispered. I've liked you for months, but I was afraid to say anything. Afraid you would think it was inappropriate, that I was taking advantage of my position, that you could not possibly feel the same way about someone like me. Someone like you, Marcus repeated, taking a step toward her. You mean someone brilliant and strong and beautiful? Someone who is trying so hard to be a better person, to fix her mistakes, to choose love over ambition? Victoria, you are the most remarkable woman I have ever met. Sophie made a noise that sounded suspiciously like a sob, and when Marcus glanced over, he saw that the teenager was wiping her eyes. Sorry, Sophie said, laughing at herself. This is just really beautiful. My mom has been alone for so long, and I always worried she would end up that way forever. But you, she looked at Marcus with fierce approval, you are good for her. You make her human. Emma, not to be left out of the emotional moment, tugged on Marcus's sleeve. Daddy, if you like Miss Victoria and she likes you, does that mean you are going to kiss her? Because in all the movies, this is when the kissing happens. Victoria laughed, a sound of pure joy, and Marcus found himself laughing too. The absurdity of the moment, the presence of their daughters as witnesses to this confession, somehow made it perfect rather than awkward. I think your daughter makes a good point, Victoria said, stepping closer to him. The movies do usually end with a kiss. Marcus closed the remaining distance between them, his heart pounding so hard he was certain everyone in the room could hear it. He reached up and gently cupped her face in his hands, giving her every opportunity to pull away, to change her mind, but she did not pull away. She leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering closed, and when he kissed her, it felt like coming home. It felt like being found after being lost for so long. The kiss was soft and sweet and full of promise, and when they finally broke apart, both girls erupted into applause and cheers. That was so romantic, Emma sighed, her hands clasped to her chest in a gesture of pure 6-year-old drama. Sophie was grinning from ear to ear, her phone in her hand. I took a picture. I hope that is okay. I want to remember this moment, the moment my mom stopped being sad. Victoria walked over to her daughter and pulled her into a hug. I love you, she said, her voice breaking. Thank you for pushing me, for not giving up on me, for giving me another chance. Sophie hugged her back fiercely. I love you too, Mom. And I am really glad you found Marcus. He is good for you. And Emma is the coolest little sister I never had. Emma beamed at being called a sister, and Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. His life had been so small for so long, narrowed down to survival and duty. But now, standing in this kitchen with Victoria's hand in his, and their daughters embracing, he felt his world expanding in the most beautiful way. They salvaged dinner somehow, though none of them could remember later what they had actually eaten. The food was secondary to the joy that filled the penthouse, to the laughter and the easy conversation and the sense that they had all found something they had not known they were looking for. After dinner, the girls retreated to Sophie's room for their sleepover, leaving Marcus and Victoria alone in the living room. They sat together on the couch, her head resting on his shoulder, his arm around her waist, and for a long time neither of them spoke. There was no need for words. They had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances, and against all odds, they had built something real. I never thought I would feel this way again, Marcus said finally, his voice low. After Sarah died, I convinced myself that chapter of my life was closed, that I had used up my allotment of happiness and all that was left was to survive and take care of Emma. Victoria lifted her head to look at him. And now, he said, pulling her closer, I am starting to believe that maybe we get more than one chance at happiness. Maybe life is not about using up some finite resource. Maybe it is about being brave enough to keep opening your heart, even when it has been broken. She kissed him again, slowly and tenderly. I'm so glad you were brave enough, she whispered against his lips. I'm so glad you did not quit like I told you you would. He smiled, remembering that first night in her office when she had been so certain he would walk away. You told me I would quit, he said, and I told you I would not. I guess I just needed to prove you wrong. You have proven me wrong about a lot of things, she said. You have shown me what really matters, what success actually looks like. And it is not corner offices or quarterly reports. It is this, us, our daughters, this moment. He held her close and looked around the penthouse that no longer felt cold or sterile but had become a home, a place where love lived and grew. You were right, he said. This is what success looks like. 6 months later, Marcus stood in front of the mirror in Victoria's bedroom, adjusting his tie for the third time. His hands were shaking slightly, and he could not seem to get the knot to sit quite right. Emma appeared in the doorway, already dressed in her flower girl dress, a confection of pale pink silk that made her look far older than her 7 years. Daddy, she said with the infinite patience of a child addressing a nervous parent, you are making it worse. Let me help. She climbed onto the bed and reached up to fix his tie with surprising competence. Mrs. Chun had been teaching her, apparently preparing her for this exact moment. Today was not a wedding, though Marcus had already bought the ring and was simply waiting for the right moment to propose. Today was something equally significant. Today was the day he was being officially introduced to the Sterling Dynamics Board of Directors in his new role as Director of Employee Relations and Corporate Culture. Victoria had created the position specifically for him, recognizing that his unique perspective, his ability to see the humanity in people regardless of their job titles, was exactly what the company needed. It had taken months of careful politic, of proving his worth through detailed proposals and successful pilot program. But she had finally convinced the board that Marcus Chun was an asset worth investing. Whitmore had resigned 2 months earlier, unable to reconcile himself to Victoria's new leadership style, one that prioritized people over pure profit. His replacement was a woman named Dr. Sarah Kim, who had spent 20 years in organizational psychology before moving into operations. She and Marcus had developed an immediate rapport, and together they were slowly transforming Sterling Dynamics from a place where employees were seen as expendable resources into a company that actually cared about the people who worked there. The changes were subtle but profound. Flexible work schedules, mental health support, parenting resources, a culture that valued presence over presenteeism. Victoria peered behind Emma in the mirror, and Marcus's breath caught at the sight of her. She was wearing a charcoal gray suit that was all business, but her hair was down and she was smiling at him with such warmth that the stern CEO persona could not quite hold. "You look perfect," she said, reaching around Emma to smooth his lapel. "You are going to be brilliant. What if they hate me?" Marcus asked, voicing the fear that had been gnawing at him for days. "What if they see me as the janitor who got lucky, who slept his way into a position he does not deserve?" Victoria's expression hardened. "Then they would be wrong, and I would correct them. But they will not, Marcus. You have earned this. Every single person who has gone through your training programs has raved about you. The employee satisfaction scores have improved by 32% since you started consulting. You are transforming this company in ways I could never have done alone." Emma patted his cheek. "And if anyone is mean to you, Sophie and I will handle them." She said it with such fierce determination that both adults laughed. Sophie had indeed become Emma's fiercely protective older sister, and the bond between the two girls was one of the most beautiful, unexpected gifts of Marcus and Victoria's relationship. Sophie now spent every other weekend in the city, and Emma spent one weekend a month in Boston, staying with Sophie and David in an arrangement that had surprised everyone with how well it worked. David had been skeptical at first, protective of his daughter and wary of Victoria's motives, but he had seen the change in Sophie, had watched her flourish under the consistent attention of a mother who was finally showing up, and he had given his cautious blessing. The board meeting went better than Marcus had dared to hope. He presented his initiatives with confidence born from months of seeing them work in practice. He spoke about the janitor who had revolutionized the company not through business strategy but through basic human decency, and he watched several board members shift uncomfortably as they realized he was talking about himself. He laid out his vision for Sterling Dynamics as a place where every employee, from the CEO to the newest hire in the mailroom, was treated with dignity and respect, where success was measured not just in profit margins but in the well-being of the people who generated those profits. When he finished, there was a moment of silence and Marcus felt his stomach drop. He had pushed too hard, been too idealistic, revealed too much of his own story. Then Wallace, the senior board member who had initially been one of Whitmore's strongest allies, began to clap. It started slowly, but within seconds the entire room had joined in. Marcus looked at Victoria, who was sitting at the head of the table with tears in her eyes and a smile of such pride that it took his breath away. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Chun," Wallace said when the applause died down. "I think you are exactly what this company needs. A reminder that our business is ultimately about people, and people deserve better than we have been giving them." That evening, they celebrated at a small Italian restaurant that had become their favorite, a family-owned place with checkered tablecloths and the best carbonara Marcus had ever tasted. Sophie and Emma were giggling over some private joke, and Victoria was holding his hand under the table, her thumb tracing circles on his palm. This is it, he thought. This is the moment. He'd been carrying the ring in his pocket for weeks, waiting for the perfect time, but he realized now that there was no such thing as perfect. There was only this moment, this table, these people he loved more than he had ever thought possible to love again. He stood up, his heart racing, and the conversation around the table stopped. Emma looked at him with wide eyes, and he saw her glance at Victoria with barely contained excitement. She knew. He had asked for her permission weeks ago, and she had given it with enthusiastic approval. Victoria looked up at him with confusion that slowly transformed into realization as he pulled the small velvet box from his pocket and lowered himself to one knee beside her chair. The restaurant around them went quiet, other diners pausing their conversations to watch. "Victoria," he said, his voice shaking but clear, "6 months ago you told me I would quit like all the rest. You predicted I would walk away, that this job and this life would be too hard for someone like me. And I told you no. I told you I would not quit, that I was here for the long haul, and I've spent every day since then proving that I meant it. You changed my life in ways I can never fully express. You gave me hope when I'd forgotten what hope felt like. You showed me that it is possible to love again, to trust again, to believe in a future that is bright instead of just bearable. You and Sophie have become my family, and Emma loves you both more than I think you even realize." He opened the box, revealing a simple platinum band with a single diamond. It was not ostentatious or enormous, but it was beautiful, and he had chosen it because it reminded him of Victoria herself, elegant, strong, and brilliant. "I do not want to spend another day without knowing that we are building this life together, permanently and intentionally. Will you marry me?" Victoria's face was wet with tears, and her hands were shaking as she reached out to touch his face. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking. "Yes, Marcus, 1,000 times yes." The restaurant erupted in applause as he slipped the ring onto her finger and stood to kiss her. Sophie was crying openly, and Emma was bouncing in her seat with such excitement that she nearly knocked over her water glass. They stayed late at the restaurant, celebrating and planning and dreaming about the future. They talked about combining their households, about Sophie transferring to a school in the city so she could live with them full-time if she wanted, about Emma's upcoming 8th birthday party and whether they should get a dog. They talked about everything and nothing, and Marcus realized that this was what happiness looked like. Not the absence of struggle or pain or difficulty, but the presence of people who made the struggle worthwhile. Later that night, after they had dropped the girls at Victoria's apartment with Mrs. Chun serving as babysitter, Marcus and Victoria walked through the city hand in hand. They found themselves, almost without planning it, standing in front of Sterling Dynamics, looking up at the gleaming tower that had been the setting for their unlikely love story. "Do you remember that first night?" Victoria asked, "when I told you that you would quit? I was so certain I was right, so convinced that I knew exactly how the story would end." "I remember," Marcus said. "And I remember thinking that you were the coldest, most intimidating person I had ever met. I was terrified of you." She laughed, leaning against him. "And now?" "Now," he said, pulling her close, "I know that the coldness was armor, and the intimidation was fear. And beneath all of that was a woman who just wanted to be seen and loved for who she really was, not who she had to pretend to be." She looked up at him, her eyes reflecting the lights of the city around them. "You saw me," he whispered, "when I was invisible to everyone else. When I had forgotten how to be anything except the CEO, you saw me. And you saved me." "We saved each other," he corrected gently. "You gave me a reason to hope again. You gave me a future I had stopped believing was possible. That is not saving. That is love." They kissed there on the sidewalk in front of Sterling Dynamics, the building where he had once pushed a cleaning cart and she had worked until the early hours of the morning, both of them alone and lost in their own ways. They kissed there, and the building seemed to witness their transformation, from employer and employee, from CEO and janitor, to partners, to family, to two people who had found in each other exactly what they needed. As they turned to walk back to the penthouse that had become their home, Marcus thought about that first night and Victoria's certainty that he would quit. She had been wrong about so many things, wrong about him, wrong about what mattered, wrong about what she needed to be happy, but she had been right about one thing. The job had been hard, the hours had been long, the challenges had been immense, and there had been moments when walking away would have been easier than staying. But he had not quit then, and he would not quit now. He had found something worth fighting for, worth staying for, worth building a life around. He had found love and family and hope, and that he thought as Victoria squeezed his hand and smiled up at him was worth everything.